From Blackfoot to Teton, we've got your District 6 breakdown right here on the East Idaho Prepcast with Lance Taylor.
That's right. It's time for another edition of the East Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, where we're breaking down everything District 6. Brandon Baney here with Lance Taylor. Show me those bear paws again. Your hands look humongous on the camera there.
Love District 6. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, there it is.
Everything's backwards on the camera.
Yeah, you have to get used to that. So if you want to see Lance flashing those digits, you can catch the video of this Prepcast on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, as well as our Facebook page. You can also get the audio only at our website, IdahoSports.com, and wherever you download your podcasts. The East Idaho Prepcast is brought to you by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports. It's your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash the beast. And it's getting closer to that time of year where up in the higher elevations, Lance, the snow is starting to fall a little bit, which is exciting.
Yeah, I was driving over the pass yesterday in between Missoula and some snow at the very top. I didn't have to drive in any of it, but you could see some up at the very top.
Yes, yeah, in those higher elevations for sure. So yeah, Lance, you're traveling this week. You are on the road in Coeur d'Alene, coming to us from up north today, but you will be back in time for tomorrow night's broadcast on IdahoSports.com. Pocatello taking on Idaho Falls at Raft Stadium, which is going to be super exciting. So let's kind of recap what happened in football last week. It was a lighter schedule in District 6, but I think the game we have to start with, Lance, was that Blackfoot Skyline showdown that we had on IdahoSports.com. It was the conference opener for both teams, and Blackfoot turned a lot of heads in a 17-13 win.
Yeah, I was on that game with Tim Belknap, and it shocked me, to be honest with you. I had a lot of questions about Blackfoot coming into that game. I didn't know how good they were, although I knew both their losses came to 5A schools by 1 point, each one of them. Before the game, really felt that that Skyline was going to win that game. When I looked at them on the field, it was interesting because Blackfoot didn't list their height and weight on the roster, and there was a tremendous visual difference in size between those two lines. Blackfoot was big. Blackfoot was fast. They got into the backfield all night long. Hackey was running for his life. He really had a hard time even trying to get the ball to Sadiq because Blackfoot was in the backfield so quick. Got impressed with Blackfoot, and I've got both feet for District 6 right now in the Blackfoot camp.
Okay, so Blackfoot's 2-2.
Yeah.
Right. Blackfoot is 2-2. Their two losses were to Thunder Ridge and Idaho Falls by a point each. So, I mean, we're talking about a play or two away from being 4-0. And I think Blackfoot really delivered and put out a good statement in that win. So let's talk about Skyline for a second, because now you look at Skyline, they're the defending 4A champs. They're 1-3. And we talked about how they had some close games as well, right? They lost on basically a couple of fluky special teams things in their season opener against Green Canyon, Utah. They played Rigby and pushed the Trojans to the limit in the second half, but then they come out here and lose another tight game. At what point do we start to say, okay, Skyline, you got to start figuring out a way to win these types of games?
Well, and even at 1-2, people were giving Skyline the benefit of the doubt. They were still number two in one of the polls and number one in the other poll last week. They've completely dropped out of both polls this week, and rightly so. You can't start 1-3 and expect to, stay in those polls. Now, I know, as far as coaches go, they don't put that much stock into those polls because you got to put it out on the field. But as far as Skyline goes, maybe we've seen their best, maybe we haven't. I Blackfoot game. Well, I went into that game thinking that I knew quite a bit about Skyline. I left realizing I didn't know as much about them as I thought.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the speed for sure. Kenyon Sadiq and Abron Severio are both really speedy guys, but maybe the size is something that they're just lacking a little bit this year. And so for Skyline, now they're getting into the portion of their season where it softens up a little bit, and they've got a chance now that they're kind of off everybody's radar to pile up some wins and maybe be a dark horse as we get closer to the end of the regular season. So that'll be something to keep an eye on for the defending 4A champs from Skyline. Let's stay in the 4A, 5A ranks. Let's talk about some of those 5A teams in the High Country Conference. Madison, 3-1. Coming into the season, they really struggled last year. Lance, it was the last season for legendary coach Mitch Buck. Now they're have a coaching change. Chandler Rhodes is in. A 26-7 win over Bonneville. And yeah, Madison hasn't played the most difficult schedule, but 3-1 start looks really good for the Bobcats.
Yeah, you can only play who's in front of you, and do the most of that schedule that you can. And they've been able to win games the way that they should against many of those teams. Their upcoming game this weekend is going to be in Holt Arena against Highland. That is one of the games that should draw a lot of interest this weekend. People know what Highland is and how good Highland is at 4-1 on the season. And their only loss came 7-12 to a good Rocky Mountain team. Of course, the Rocky Mountain team that lost to rival Mountain View earlier on. But people want to see how good Madison is. We know how Highland is. Let's see how good Madison is.
And Kieran Valora is a good quarterback. You could tell last year it was his first year as a starter, and he looked very uncomfortable at times. But he's really transitioned and thrived now in his second year as the starter for Madison. The other biggest surprise, Lance, has to be Idaho Falls. We kind of talked about him last week a little bit, but playing Century, an undermanned Century team, but they won 51-14. Idaho Falls, a 4-0 start, kind of the same deal. Skylar Olson last year at quarterback at times looked a little shaky. He has made so many significant improvements in the offseason. It's been very impressive to watch.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think he is I never want to say single-handedly. Obviously, you have to have a good line. You have to have a lot of things that fall into place. But I think he's the biggest piece to that puzzle that has changed, that has helped give them that success this year. Idaho Falls, I'll have that game this weekend. Pocatello coming in and playing Idaho Falls at Rafston Stadium. And Pocatello is a good team. They are not bad at all. They did take a shellacking to Highland, but again, we know what Highland is. But Pocatello could really give Idaho Falls a run. They're a good enough team to do that. I've already had Pocatello earlier this year at the Rocky Mountain Rumble. I'm excited to see Idaho Falls, but Idaho Falls, what a surprise this year. Again, they were the team that really was on almost nobody's radar.
Yeah, well, I mean, they went winless last year, Lance, and it's been a couple of years for Idaho Falls since they have been kind of in the mix for things. They were at the 4A level, they jumped up to 5A, and that's always a tough transition to make. And so it's been really fun. If you told me coming into the season that Madison and Idaho Falls would be a combined 7-1, I'm not sure I would have taken that bet, but it's really amazing to see.
We definitely would not have laid down any Vegas money on that being the case, for sure. Yeah, both of them have been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say with that Pocatello matchup Friday night, Lance, I think it's set up really well for Idaho Falls to win, and kind of in a big way, because Pocatello right now is a little bit banged up. Ryan Payne, their starting quarterback, has a shoulder injury. He didn't play last week against Highland. Their backup quarterback is a sophomore, Dre Contreras. He didn't play against Highland last week either. So what they did is they took last year's quarterback, who is now at receiver, Zach Park, and put him back at their quarterback. And you could tell it had been about a year since he had taken a snap at QB.
Sure. So, it changes your game plan. It really changes your game plan.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know if Contreras will be available. I know Ryan Payne won't. So either way, Pocatello is going to be on a backup quarterback. It's just whether it's the second or the third string. So I think it sets up really well for Idaho Falls actually to get a nice non-conference win. And at this point, Lance, when you talk about the 5A postseason, it's been proven in years past. If you get to 5 wins, you're pretty much in. You're pretty much in the playoffs because 12 of the 21 teams qualify for the postseason. So if IF can get to 5-0, I mean, we're talking maybe now playoffs.
Yeah. I think IF can. I think we're going to see IF there. Obviously, they are yet to have hit the toughest part of their schedule. But again, you can only take care of the teams that are in front of you at this point, and they've done that so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll be a fun matchup Friday night on IdahoSports.com. Pocatello at Idaho Falls from Ravston Stadium. Okay, let's talk about the Rigby Trojans as well. Rigby kind of just quietly goes about their business, not much fanfare or hype. I was a little surprised, Lance, that in one of the polls this week, Rigby had been the number one team pretty consistently. And then all of a sudden this week, Mountain View jumped them in one of the polls. And so
in the coaches poll, Mountain View jumped, and that surprised me as well. There's only one other poll that I kind of disagreed with more than that. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I was really shocked that they had dropped to number 2. Of course, Media Poll still has Rigby, Mountain View, Rocky Mountain, Highland, and Lewiston, which I think is pretty good. In fact, I think Highland, however, might be ranked a little bit low in that, but based upon Rocky Mountain beating Highland and then Mountain View beating Rocky Mountain, I understand that. But Lewiston does pop into one of the polls as well at number 5.
Yeah, and we'll see. They're kind of in the same boat as Idaho Falls. They came in with not a ton of fanfare, and now here they are sitting at 4-0. So
yeah.
So Rigby, a 35-0 shutout of Hillcrest. Hillcrest, we talked about, it was going to be a tough year for them because they've got a new coach, Brennan Mossholder, who coached in Oregon previously. But it's not only that; it's a complete change and shift from what they did in the past under former coach Kevin Meyer, where they had everybody, all 11 guys in tight and just ran the ball pretty much every play. And now they've kind of shifted to a more traditional offense that we would see in today's game. And the transition after 3 years of running, just run, it's hard to flip the switch like that. So we knew it was going to be a work in progress, but for Hillcrest, there are encouraging signs, but for Rigby, they continue to just win and win in pretty dominant fashion. Yeah,
they do. And, for Hillcrest, for a bigger school, which you rarely really see the double wing or the wing T, we used to see that out of them a little bit. You see that a lot of the 2A ranks, some places at the 3A ranks as well. But Hillcrest, I don't think we're going to see a lot of turnaround for them this season. I think any turnaround is probably going to happen next year. Not that they can't play better, obviously, throughout the rest of this year. They could, but I just don't see a big push there. But Rigby just keeps on going through. And Rigby's got a pretty good game this weekend. They're at Thunder Ridge. Thunder Ridge, a Thunder Ridge team that many people thought was the next team behind Rigby going into this season. That's changed a little bit with loss that took place earlier. But I think this could be a good game this weekend, and that is at Thunder Ridge.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting game. And we talked about Thunder Ridge lost to Idaho Falls in that conference opener. So that's it was an eye-raising result for sure. Rigby, real quick, let's give a shout out to Talon Togiai, the big boy at nose tackle, committing to BYU. That's pretty exciting stuff for that PB team.
It is. And not only that, but BYU had that big win over Arizona State last week. And the very first play of the ball game on a kickoff was a fumble. BYU forced a fumble. And Livingston, former Rigby boy, jumped on the ball and recovered the fumble. He's actually had a couple pretty big plays this year so far in college football.
Yeah, so big shout out to Talon Togiai, and I know he's going to be the first of probably several Division I players that get offers. Logan Fredrickson at linebacker, Tiger Adolfo at quarterback, et cetera. So it's going to be exciting to watch that matchup. Okay, the last 4A team we have to talk about in the High Country Conference is, again, a team that just continues to impress, and it's the Shelley Russets. 4-0, a 49-0 shutout over Canyon Ridge. This is reminding me of Shelley in their 3A heyday.
Yeah. Well, and I think the only probably the only shocker against Canyon Ridge. I mean, I don't think anybody saw 49-0 coming. I think people maybe saw 60-0, 70-0. I'm just kidding there. Canyon Ridge is not very good. Shelley has put together some good wins. Now, Shelley is yet to hit the toughest part of their season as well, and they've got Hillcrest coming up and then Bonneville, both of those games at home. So their first biggest test is really going to be, because they have 3 home games in a row, is really going to be when Pocatello comes in there. But Shelley just keeps taking care of business. Take care of the people that are in front of you. That's all you can do, and that's what they're doing, and they're doing it in good fashion.
Yeah, there's a really good chance that Shelley is 6-0 heading into those final 3 games, Pocatello, Blackfoot, Skyline, which will probably define their season, right? Biggest difference for Shelley is we know they can run the ball, right? They've got Riker Klinger, they've got Josh Gill who can run the ball, they've got Brock DeRoche, they got Skylar Robinson, they've got like 5 or 6 guys that can run the football. The biggest difference is now they have a quarterback that can keep the defense honest as well. So Caden Kidman started at quarterback for Shelley last year as a sophomore. Well, this year they moved Kidman to like wide receiver / running back, and they've gone with another sophomore, Brecker Williams. And in the game I saw and covered against Jerome, he moves really well in the pocket. He doesn't look like a sophomore quarterback, and that element has given Shelley even more dimensions on offense, where the defense can't just pack in against the run. They have to be prepared for a long ball from Brecker Williams.
That's right. In fact, they look very good. I saw them against Sugar earlier this year. They've got a very solid defense as well. One of the things that Shelley has been good at this year is against the run. They're getting people down with their line. The runners against them are not being able to get into the secondary, and that keeps games, that worst case scenario for you, very close, if not a blowout on your side of it. And Shelley has really benefited from that. Their defense is extremely solid this year.
Yeah, I mean, look at these defensive totals. Preston, 6 points allowed. Sugar, 7 points. Jerome, 7. Canyon Ridge, shutout. So, yeah. You're talking about a great defense for sure. Yeah. So, speaking of Sugar-Salem, that was a big matchup in the 3A ranks as they traveled to Aramo to play Marsh Valley, and the Diggers dug out and found a way, 28-14, in what was a pretty good matchup.
Well, Sugar's finding a few things out about themselves right now. Took those first couple games. Some of their key players, of course, their main running back, Ryan Harris got hurt in the first series or second series of the very first game of the season. He'll be back in their next game. They have a bye week this week. He'll be back against Preston following that. That should change things up. But the other guys had to learn how to play varsity football. I had a good talk over the weekend with Tyler Richens, and that's kind of what they're going through. He's not super worried. He looked and said, we got a bunch of guys that are new at this, and we talked, and he agreed, that players, they even if they're physically ready, you still have to learn how to play the varsity game, and that's really what Sugar was going through this year. I don't think Sugar is what they were last year, the year before, or the year before that, at least not at this point. They're not, but a big win over Marsh Valley. They were up 21-7 at one point in that ball game. Was Sugar ended up winning at 28-14. But that was a good win for them.
Sugar, to me, is almost like Skyline, where they started the year 0-2, got dropped out of the polls, and now they're not in people's forefront of their mind, right? And so now for Sugar, this is a chance for away from the spotlight a little bit, get some confidence, rack up those wins, and again, by the time we're talking playoffs, I think once again Sugar is going to be a team that nobody wants to see. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. South Fremont. Let's talk about Teton as well. Teton got their first win of the season, which was great to see, shutting out Salmon 38-0. Those are two programs that are still trying to find their way, right? So Salmon's 1-2, Teton's 1-3. It's nice to see the Timberwolves get off the schneid. Both of those teams have first-year head coaches as well, by the way.
Yeah, they do. And for Teton, you're in a small conference, only 3 teams, which means essentially you only play 2 conference games during the regular season. And, everybody else is going to be outside of your conference. It's tough to try to get a schedule, together. Teton's kind of a ways away from places, and Salmon's way away from places. But those are 2 teams that, like you said, they're trying to find their way right now. And for Teton, they had to feel pretty thrilled picking that victory up.
Yeah, first win for new head coach Jeff Wilkes at Teton. So the other 3A, 2A game that turned a lot of heads was South Fremont traveling to Firth. Firth got out to a big lead, and South Fremont tried to rally back in the second half. But the Cougars, I was impressed. Firth last year, they won 33-21. So Firth last year, I think, was pretty disrespected throughout the whole regular season, right? It was always, they're good, but North Fremont's better. North Fremont beat them in the regular season. Then you get to the playoffs, right? That semifinal game that Firth wins 7-6 in that blizzard. Yeah. Well, they got lucky. It was fluky. They're not really good. They lose by 40 to West Side in the championship. And so coming into this season, you were hearing the same things. Yeah, Firth's good, but North Fremont's better. You know, Firth is, I'm telling you, 3-1, and they are a play away from knocking off West Side.
Yeah,
4-0. Firth
that's right.
is real.
Yeah, 26-20 is what they lost to West Side. I mean, a great West Side team that I've felt would compete very well at 3A division this year. I don't know how they'd match up against Homedale, but other than that, I think they would do very well in the 3A division. South Fremont, I think if you had one more quarter in that game, South Fremont might win that game.
Yeah.
South Fremont, again, one of those teams that started out 3-0. They found out a lot about themselves when they came down the other night, when they were down to Firth and started on that comeback. I think South Fremont is, again, one of those teams that will sneak in under the radar just a little bit. Obviously, 3A, 2A, 1A have an extra round of playoffs that you don't have in 4A, 5A. So they should get into the playoffs pretty much no matter what from this point on. But South is a good team. South is a good team, and they're going to turn some heads.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about possibly, you know, South Fremont playing for a 3A title, Firth playing for a 2A title. I mean, that's how good both of those programs are for sure. And Firth is getting it done on the defensive line. Same as last year. You know, Athen Blomqvist had 33 sacks last year, which is just mind-boggling, and he's doing it again. I don't know how you stop the guy. You pretty much have to double team him every time.
Yeah, you pretty much do, or certainly run away from him. You know, from his side. But yeah, they're very good. And you know, South Fremont last year when they reached the semis, that's the farthest they've ever reached in the playoffs. And you're talking a team that's had not only players that have gone, or a school that's not only had players go on to play big time college ball, but have gone on to the NFL. And that was the farthest they had got. And South Fremont very well could be a team this year that goes to the championship.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good 3A, 2A teams in District 6. A team that's kind of flying under the radar, playing third banana to North Fremont and Firth in that nuclear conference is West Jefferson. They are 3-1 with a 38-0 shutout win over Malad, their latest victory.
Yeah, that was at a Malad homecoming. Malad being my alma mater, where I went, and that's a tough way to spend your homecoming with a goose egg up on the board. However, West J is good, and this week they've got a game that's going to be a game to watch as well, as they're going to face North Fremont, and that's going to be at West Jefferson. So that's a game to watch as well, and we're really going to see kind of where West Jefferson stands. We know a lot more again about North Fremont than really we do about West Jefferson. We still have some questions about West Jefferson, so we'll get a lot of those answered this weekend.
Yeah, and if you look purely at scores, it's a pretty even matchup because North Fremont played Malad as well and won 54-8, and now they've had a week off as well. They had a bye last week, so they've had 2 weeks to prepare for West J, which could swing it in their favor. But I agree, I think that's going to be a fantastic matchup for sure. Finally, let's tackle the 1A ranks. Let's start with the game we had on IdahoSports.com, a 4 p.m. kickoff on Friday. I like it at Water Springs
as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Grace gets their first win of the season over Water Springs, 41-26. Water Springs is the defending Rocky Mountain Conference champ in 1A D2. They've had a very tough schedule. Doesn't get any easier when Horseshoe Bend comes to town this week.
Right.
But for Grace, it was nice to see them get their first win.
Yeah, it was. Grace actually has a bye week, and then they play Rockland. Rockland was out scouting that game while we were there on Friday. But Grace is a team that I picked in the preseason that I felt would really push potentially for a state championship, and they really struggled getting out of the gate. But Grace did good the other night, and Grace found a few things out with their big tight end that they can do in ball games and make it work for them. And I thought Grace looked very good. I thought they certainly looked better than what their record showed.
I agree. I mean, they lost that shootout to North Gem in the season opener where they could have won the game and ultimately came up a little bit short. So, yeah, Grace will be a team to keep an eye on. Water Springs, I mean, they're 1-3 now, Lance. They're hosting Horseshoe Bend, which is a top 5 team in the D2 ranks, and possibly staring down a 1-4 start with games against Rockland and North Gem still on the schedule. The Warriors got to get it going here pretty quickly.
Yeah, they do. One of the things they struggled with last week was when teams would get into their secondary. Their secondary is not very big, and they ended up, at 145, 150 pounds trying to strength tackle guys that were 200 pounds, and that really worked against them. I think one of the things that Water Springs has to be able to do is they've got to be able to bring people down with their linemen, because if teams get into their secondary, that hurts them. However, they've got a great passing game. I mean, their first 2 touchdowns the other day were, last Friday were on bombs that were just right on the button. So they've got the ability to pass the ball, and they've got some decent finesse runners and some good power runners. So, Water Springs has the ability to get it. It's just about working with your strengths.
Defense, the name of the game for sure. The final game we want to highlight from last week, Butte County traveled to Raft River. That was a matchup of top 5 teams in the 1A D1 ranks. And Butte County, I thought, actually held their own really well against what I think is the best team in the state right now in 1A D1 football, Raft River. They lost 46-28, but I think Butte County has nothing to be ashamed of losing that game, and I think it reflected in the polls because they didn't move up or down. They stayed right where they were at number 5.
Yeah, they did. And when it comes to the polls in this scenario, I think you got you got a Raft River team that is very good. People knew what they were, and I think it even surprised people that Butte was able to do what they did against them. But Raft River is very good. In fact, I feel that Raft River is really underranked, particularly in the media polls. They have them down at 3rd. I can't really argue with Oakley being number 1 in both those polls, but we'll see. We'll see as time moves forward. But Raft River is very good in the 8-man ranks.
Every week when you look at the media poll, you see the first place votes in parentheses and next to Raft River. Every week so far this year, you've seen a lonely little one. That's me. Yeah. That's my one. I keep voting Raft River, but nobody wants to follow me. So
Sure. Well, and the games have to be played on the field. Then you might get some vindication when the playoffs come.
Absolutely. Hey, let me ask you real quick. What was the other poll you disagreed with? Was it the 4A? Because that is a hot mess right now, Lance.
It is. I mean, you got Emmett, Minico, Shelley, Blackfoot, and Pocatello in one of the polls. I don't necessarily disagree with that. However, in the media poll, Minico, Shelley, Pocatello, Emmett, and Bishop Kelly, I think Emmett's proven a little bit more at this point than Shelley has. And again, I love Shelley, but they haven't hit the tough part of their schedule yet. They really haven't played one of those teams that you step up and say, wow, that was a massive win. So I think that number 2 ranking is a little bit off, and I'm not so sure that Bishop Kelly should be in the top 5 at this point. Bishop Kelly got shut out by Emmett. They put up a goose egg. I'm really not sure that Bishop Kelly is a top 5 4A team. In fact, right now, if I had to put Vegas money down between a Bishop Kelly and a Skyline team, even with 3 losses, I'm choosing Skyline in that game.
Yep, I agree. Bishop Kelly is very one-dimensional. Yes. They cannot, if they get behind early, it's almost impossible for them to come back. We saw that last year in their playoff loss to Century. They came in with all the hype and fanfare, and Century got out to an early lead, and BK could not recover. So I'll tell you, Lance, my poll was not anywhere close to what the media poll was. My personal top 5 when I voted, I had Emmett as number 1. I think they've earned that distinction. Their only loss was by 1 score to an undefeated Weezer team. My number 2 team was Minico because they're undefeated. They have defeated Middleton, which is a good squad, and I gave them the nod there. I had Pocatello 3rd. I had Pocatello 3rd last week, and all they did was lose to Highland, which is a really good team. So I'm not gonna penalize teams that lose to good programs,
sure, especially when you're down players as well.
Yeah, so I had Pocatello 3rd. I had Blackfoot 4th on the heels of that big win over Skyline and those 2 1-point losses. And then I still have Sandpoint ranked in my top 5 as well. I know they lost to Homedale. I know they lost to Coeur d'Alene, but I think people are sleeping on Sandpoint up north as well. So
I think they are too. And I think, again, one of the biggest shocks of that poll is Blackfoot not being on there. Blackfoot, if people are just going by the records, okay. Maybe you can justify that, but I'll tell you what, Blackfoot, if you've actually seen them play, they pass the eye test. They're a very good team.
I'll tell you right now, the 4A postseason is going to be fun.
Oh, that might be the best of the postseasons. 5A is going to be very good too. I mean, they're all always good, but I think 4A and 5A are especially good this year.
Yeah, a lot of chaos in there for sure. So
Yep.
let's end the Prepcast today, Lance, with some volleyball talk. We got to talk about Sugar-Salem Volleyball. I mean, they are 20-0. They won the Peg Peterson invite in Highland at the start of September, which is you're playing 5A, 4A, 3A schools. They won the Bonneville Classic last week. Same deal, 5A, 4A, 3A schools. They have dropped 3 sets this year, not 3 matches, 3 sets. They've only dropped 3 sets all year, Lance. They might be the best team. Go ahead.
They are fantastic. They dropped one to Fruitland, dropped one to Eagle, and dropped one to Star Valley. What's the other one that they dropped? And now they go into some of their conference schedule. You know, they got a home and home against South, home and home against Teton, but then they've got an Idaho, games against Idaho Falls coming up, Skyline, Star Valley that will be at Sugar-Salem. Cammie Dodson is a fantastic coach. I mean, just a fantastic coach. And if you haven't seen Sugar's volleyball team play, you're missing out on some really good sports. They're very good.
I think it's pretty clear the 2 best teams, regardless of classification in the state for volleyball right now, are Skyview at the 5A level. They went to Las Vegas and competed very well. And Sugar, can we get that match set up? Can we get Skyview versus Sugar? I would love to see that.
Well, I think both those teams have the attitude of anyone, anytime. I think they have that kind of attitude because they are very good. That would be a sensational matchup. I've always felt that it would be fun to take the top teams in every division as soon as the state championships are over and determine an overall state champion. I've always felt that would be fun. Obviously, logistically, that's tough to do, but that would be a fantastic matchup. That's one that if that happened, we would need to cover on Idaho Sports, and we'd have a lot of computers hooked to our stream. I can tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic for sure. Real quick, I want to give shout outs to the other volleyball teams that are doing well. But, the volleyball coaches poll came out yesterday. In the 5A ranks, Madison is currently ranked 2nd, which is amazing, only behind Skyview. And we knew coming in that Madison was going to be pretty solid once again. Yeah. The 4A ranks, Bonneville is ranked 2nd, which I think, again, is pretty reflective of how good they are. They played really well at their classic, the Bonneville Classic last weekend. 3A, Sugar, of course, is the number 1 team. South Fremont is tied for 5th. We talked about, South Fremont's in any other conference. They may win it, but they're just, unfortunately, in the shadow of that Goliath.
Yeah. And the thing is, oftentimes you get that. I mean, there's been times, especially because of limited amounts of teams that go to the state tournament. We see it in basketball a lot with only 8 teams going to the state tournament where you'll have a team that maybe the conference only gets 1 in, things like that, where sometimes the second best team in the state doesn't even go to the state tournament because of just who they happen to be matched up against. And Southeast Idaho is a sensational volleyball place.
Yeah, absolutely. In the 2A ranks, Ryrie is ranked 3rd. Ryrie quietly putting together a nice season, and West J is ranked 5th in the latest coaches poll. 1A D1, Grace is 3rd. Butte County is tied for 5th. And then in the 1A D2 poll, Horseshoe Bend has been the number 1 team almost the entire season, Lance, until this week. Mackey finally surpassed them, and we talked about Coach Kesha Hale and the great job that she is doing there. So for Mackey, I really like their chances in the 1A D2 ranks this year as well.
Yeah, Mackey's looking good, and Mackey's a name we haven't, thrown around the last couple of years in a lot of different sports, and Mackey's starting to put some things together, and I think they're going to make a run in that 1A division.
Yeah, so Mackey ranked 1st. Grace Lutheran from Pocatello is ranked 3rd, and then Ledor is tied for 5th. So that's 3 teams all from the same conference in the top 5. So that's going to be right. Yeah, a lot of fun to watch. So good volleyball, good football action, of course. Soccer still going as well. So we'll be back to recap it all again next week. Lance, you're going to be on the call Friday night at Ravston Stadium as Idaho Falls hosts Pocatello, where we're going to tune in, and hopefully it's a great matchup.
Yeah, I certainly hope so as well.
Yep. So we'll be back to talk about that game and more on next week's edition of the East Idaho Prepcast, presented by Pure Adrenaline Motorsports, your source for pulse-pounding adrenaline sports apparel and accessories that ensure you have what you need to unleash the beast. For Lance Taylor, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on IdahoSports.com.